I'm going to run through some design considerations to think about, may or may not be specific to a log home, but are important on a log home. So, first and foremost, keeping rain, keeping sun off of the logs obviously is going to make them last a lot longer. Those are the two primary factors that degrade the protection systems, the stain on a log home. So big overhangs, porches, wraparound decks, they can almost pay for themselves throughout the life of a log cabin by extending the maintenance cycles, the intervals when you need to do the maintenance. Keeping water, keeping the UV, the sunlight off of them is huge. Big overhangs, we recommend at least 2 feet, 3 or 4 feet if you can do it. Some people require extra design care, that needs to be done in the design. Some log home manufacturers have options to extend them, some don't, but that is something to consider. Along with that are gutters, right? Keeping that water off of your log cabin. With that said, gutters can be a detriment if you don't actually clean them. Right? Then they're overflowing and water is running down your fascia and down your logs versus just running completely off of your roof. I can't tell you how many log homes I go to have log rot, and it is a very localized area where the gutters are leaking. One of the other things we see a lot are the downspouts back up. Homeowner goes up and cleans the gutters a lot of the time, but you're not standing out there in the rain looking at your cabin while it's raining, and those leaves have worked their way down the downspout and blocked up. So in a heavy rain comes down, it gets plugged up, it can't drain quick enough, the water fills up the downspout and it starts overflowing out of the joints in the downspout. And then we've got rot from wherever that joint is, kind of downward in a funnel. Another thing to consider in the design aspect of a log home is the foundation. In an ideal world, you have some type of masonry up 3 feet above, a lot of people say above the snow line. So depending on where your region, where you're building, but two things to consider there. One is, yes, the drifts of snow. You don't want to hold that moisture, that snow up against your logs. Snow slowly melts, it soaks into the wood, it can refreeze and fracture the wood. We've seen that. The other thing, which is more common, is backsplash. Water that just barely misses the gutters when coming down, hits a hard surface, splashes back up against the bottom, 1 or 2 course of logs. That rolls into what I call softscaping, right? You're landscaping around the perimeter of your roof line just outside of the gutters, right? If you've got river rock, a concrete sidewalk is what we see a lot of the times. That water just misses the gutter, hits that sidewalk, hits that river rock, and splashes back, right? If you can plant some soft shrubbery, put a bush out there where it's going to hit and dissipate, deflect the water, not bounce as far. It's going to give, the leaves give and it kind of sheds it down towards the ground versus projecting it back towards the cabin. A lot of the times we see a log cabin is 20, 30 years old, no issues. Homeowners will pave a sidewalk from the driveway around to the front porch, and 2-3 years later, the bottom 2 logs are rotted the whole way along there, right? So, just didn't think about it. It was never a problem, something to be aware of. The other area we see splashback a lot of times is around air conditioning units. A lot of times those condenser units are set up within a foot or 2 of the house, but they stick out past the overhangs. So now when it rains, it hits the top of that unit, splashes back on the house, and we see rot, deteriorated wood kind of in this arced shape around the exterior air conditioning units. So putting a shed roof over that or designing that to be in a covered area can save you some headache in the long run. Another thing, not specific to log homes, but we see a lot on all porches, people with wood deck, posts, holding up porch posts. The water blows in, driving rain, the water blows in, sits on the deck, and it runs up against those posts and it wicks up in the ends of those porch posts and starts to rot. Having what I call H-clips, which elevates the bottom of that post up an inch or so you've got an air gap so the moisture can't wick up in. A lot of log home structures have a piece of all thread and a plate and a nut. It gives you that air gap, but you can also adjust that post up and down for any settling that's occurred. The other thing is log ends. The butt ends where a log has been cut tend to wick in, absorb more moisture than the horizontal, the exterior wall surfaces. And then they protrude a lot of times out past the overhangs or out very close to the overhangs. Be mindful of that. Make sure you're keeping an eye on those. Those tend to be one of the first areas to start noticing both the protection system breaking down and then rot starting to set in. So take a look in those areas. Another common area to inspect where rot tends to occur is if you're looking at a window, a third of the way up, kind of out in a funnel shape is where we tend to see some rot. As water's running down the log wall and wind's driving against the wall, it tends to work in behind the window trim. And then as it gets down, it starts wicking in the ends of the bottom logs and it starts to rot kind of in a funnel shape out there, along with the bottom sill where you've got water standing on it. So those are some prone areas just to keep in mind and inspect on a regular basis. All right, hope that helped.